Hello everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to this installment of the Lexsynergy webinar series entitled The .Bank Decision. My name is Marina Robbins and I am the Marketing Manager at Lexsynergy. Just a couple of notes before we begin. We will have some time at the end of the presentation for Q&A. So if you have any questions, please use the Q&A box on the WebEx window to submit them and we'll address them at the end. Also, we will be uploading this presentation to our YouTube page and we'll email out the link to all participants. Today, we're happy to have the team from FTLD Registry Services joining us for the presentation. FTLD is a company that manages both .bank and .insurance top-level domains on behalf of the banking and insurance industries. To introduce today's presenters, on the Lexsynergy side, we have Jake Spencer, who is the Chief Technology Officer at Lexsynergy. And from FTLD, we have Craig Schwartz, the Managing Director, and Drew Schiff, Director of Engagement Services. And just to quickly review the agenda, FTLD will first talk about why banks should consider moving to .bank, the steps of actually making the move, and what a typical migration process looks like. Then Jake and I will give an overview of what the process with Lexsynergy will entail and details about our AnyClass DNS offering. We'll then end with a Q&A. So with that, I will pass it off to Drew at FTLD.
Hi, Marina. Thank you. So I'd like to start today by talking a bit about how we got where we are today, in that we have 500 banks that are actively using the domain, and yet the conversation that we typically have when we first engage with a new bank that's exploring their migration over to .bank is that they have some curiosity around why it isn't perhaps even more, what the benefits are, what the challenges of migration are, what they can expect the process to look like. And so if you transition to the next slide here, give you some overview of what those common questions and concerns are. So when we launched a few years back now, it wasn't immediately clear, the information wasn't immediately available or easily available for a lot of banks to understand what the benefits were to moving from .com to .bank, particularly given that when we launched with about 1,300 other TLDs, which tended to water down the fact that there might be specific benefits to one TLD versus another. So, when we came out, there were many banks that just anticipated that .bank was just a marketing focus that made it really obvious you were a bank versus .com, where it may not be as clear. Additional concerns that were particularly relevant for our community banks were the cost and complexity to make the move. There was some concern that anything that was going to help make a bank more secure would be technologically complex, and a lot of our community banks have relatively small and overwhelmed technical teams that are focused on state and federal regulations that they have to deal with, and new sites and things of that nature. And anything that's technically complex is typically expensive. So those two were primary concerns for a lot of our community bankers in the space, worried that this was going to be something that they either couldn't afford or really couldn't tackle internally. So they really wanted to see other banks doing it first to kind of prove that it was something they could tackle. We're pleased to say today that we have banks anywhere from the $50 million assets up to 15+ billion. So this is certainly a solution that we've found. Very small one-branch banks up to much larger, much more sophisticated banks both see the value in and are capable of making the migration. So as we found out what the concerns were, we really focused a lot of our attention on identifying good vendors such as Lexsynergy who could assist with these migrations, and on the education part to help banks identify what are the true benefits, what's the difference between .bank and .com and the many other domains, and what does the cost and complexity really look like. And I think what we'll be focusing on largely today is how working with you all as their registrar, your customers can significantly reduce the cost and complexity that they face in making this move and making their online presence and their online communications far more secure. So if you move through to the next slide, you'll see that the footprint of .bank has continued to grow across the country. We're now at about 500 banks that are live and actively using their domain and their emails. The blue dots are higher concentration, so you'll notice that particularly in the Midwest and the Northeast and rapidly growing now in the Southeast, we have these pockets of .bank growing, but we're really well represented across the country, and this number continues to grow on a weekly basis. So we're working with many banks on this migration, and it's thanks to a better understanding of what the value proposition is and to the relationships these banks have with providers such as yourselves. So on the next slide, I'd like to talk about why it is that when we talk to banks and they really finally make the decision to move, what's going through their heads and what's really driving that. When we first started seeing a large uptick in banks making the move about 6-7 months ago, it was about the same time that we released a lot of our educational material. So there was some thought that perhaps it was purely this new understanding of the value proposition that was driving that. But in fact, as we talk to banks, the biggest problem that they're trying to solve for is the phishing attacks that they've either seen in their community or they continue to read about or have in fact suffered through themselves. And as this first bullet points out, financial institutions are yet again listed at the top of the most phished organizations in the world. Phishing last year led to over 92% of all breaches, and to complicate things further, typically, phishing in the past relied very heavily on malicious links and malicious attachments. So if someone opened an email and was cautious not to click on a link or to download anything, they were generally speaking pretty safe. Nowadays, the phishing has become more sophisticated, and they're focusing on social engineering, which doesn't rely on the links and the attachments, which we can scan with our software and hardware that we all have in our inboxes to ensure that we don't have these malicious attacks. They focus rather on engagement with the person on the other side of the channel. So they're asking general questions until there's a bit of a relationship, and then they ask for more information until there's something that they can use to create a credential, whether it's to actually penetrate that email system or to build a profile on someone for identity theft and financial fraud. So it's become, because of this social engineering, far more critical that all organizations, but particularly financial institutions as the most phished organizations, they need to become more recognizable to their employees, to their vendors, and to their customers, so that it's really simple for people on the other side of the receiving side of an email to know this is an authentic email from my bank. This website that I'm about to log into is actually my bank, so that they are able to prevent negative interactions with bad actors, because you can't just look for the links and look for the attachments anymore. You need to know that what you're engaging with is authentically the bank, and that's where .bank really shines. So .bank is really that easy to implement, affordable, additional layer of security. And the nice thing is that it's not replacing or conflicting with any of the other tools that banks have in place. So they'll continue to have the scanning services and the various vendors that help them to secure their bank. This is just yet another layer that helps to incorporate authentication into their security, so that, again, their employees, vendors, and customers can quickly recognize and authenticate email from them and their website before they interact with it. So .bank actually also provides a layer that can't be replicated outside of .bank, in that in .com or any of the publicly available domains, you'll know that for $10, $15, a bad actor can get a lookalike domain to try and interact with your employees and your customers and your vendors in order to try and gain access to information. So by slightly misspelling your name or by adding modifiers, MainStreetBankSecurity.com, MainStreetBankCustomerSupport.com, these kind of modifiers that draw question in from your customers that this could be a real email address. It makes sense that a bank would have a security team and that perhaps they would have their own email address. So again, by adding these modifiers or slightly misspelling your name, they can create a domain for very little money and effort that allows them to engage with people in your bank and your customers in a way that could ultimately lead to identity theft, financial fraud, or even a breach. Within .bank, because we verify and authenticate everyone who comes in looking for a domain to ensure that they are a licensed organization, that they're regulated, that the person who's requesting the domain is an employee of that organization, and that they have the authorization of that organization to purchase the domain, and that they're not, for lack of a better reference, a rogue employee looking to do this on their own. We verify and authenticate that for every entrant into the space, ensuring that, similar to .gov or .edu, everyone in the space belongs in the space. And then we do that authentication again every single year to ensure that the space remains secure. So that's something that makes sure that you are dealing with, anytime you're in the .bank realm, whether it's a website or an email, that you're dealing with an authenticated, verified bank or financial organization. So that's something that can't be replicated in .com because the lookalike domains are so prevalent and so easy to access. And finally, I think one of the key things to note here is that visual authentication is already a very common behavior in your customers and your employees, and that when they're on Facebook and Twitter, they all see that little blue check mark. That means an account has been verified by Facebook or by Twitter as authentic. So whether it's a politician or a Fortune 500 company or a celebrity, it's a way that they know how to verify whether it's a real account or a pretend account that might be operating nefariously. So it's something that you can use when you educate your customers during your transition over from .com or .net to .bank, is that they look for the .bank when they're about to interact with an email. They look for a .bank before they enter in their username and password to ensure that this is an authentic interaction that they're about to partake in. So on the next slide, this is a relatively new tool of ours that kind of outlines the best practices across hundreds of banks that have already made the launch. And what it is it's a 6-week timeline that we recommend using to make the move. So once you've already decided this is a move you want to make, this kind of outlines the process for moving forward. And the top half focuses on the technological piece of it and setting up the website, doing the testing of your email on the site itself, forwarding your email, testing that, and setting up redirects. The bottom half focuses on the marketing half and the education part, and it shows you in the first couple of weeks the collateral that we recommend you create, from emails and blog posts to press releases and potentially teller slips to be handed out. And then it gives you a timeline of approximately when to publish the various pieces of collateral to help educate your employees and customers of the upcoming move prior to a launch. So as I said, this is typically about a 6-week window where the first couple of weeks is spent setting up our security requirements and the email, doing your testing, and creating the various forms of collateral. And the final 4 weeks is focused on the actual education part, that we're educating everyone in your network about the upcoming launch. So as I mentioned earlier on, the nice thing about the interaction that everyone dialed into the call today has, and the benefit that everyone has today, is that much of this is simplified in that the top half of this timeline is largely covered by your team, so that the complexity of setting up the 6 security requirements that are involved with setting up a .bank domain are handled by your team as part of their annual cost, aside from the TLS certificate, which I'm sure your team will cover. And with that, I'd like to kind of turn things over to your team to talk a bit of how that interaction would go in setting up a .bank domain with Lexsynergy.
Yeah. Thank you, Drew. So once you're ready to start the migration process, we really try to make it as simple as possible. The first step is just to notify our team that you are planning on making the switch. And as you saw in the last slide, this will ideally happen at the beginning of the process with at least a few weeks of prior notice prior to launch. However, if you do have a shortened timeline, that is okay, and we will work with you to make it happen. But you can simply notify us by sending an email to support@lexsynergy.com and just tell us that you're ready to start the migration process. Once we've received the notification, Lexsynergy will then schedule a kickoff call with all relevant parties. On the call, we'll have a representative from Lexsynergy's technical team, and on your side, we'll just need someone from your tech team and a representative from your web host provider if necessary. On the call, we'll discuss your launch plans, including timelines, and what will need to be done to set up the necessary DNS records. Then, leading up to the launch, Lexsynergy is available to assist with all DNS questions and ensure a smooth transition. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jake Spencer to review Lexsynergy's AnyClass DNS offering.
Hi. So there are the complicated parts of setting up your .bank or .insurance domain largely revolve around the security aspects, which we cover from a DNS perspective so you don't have to. Our AnyClass DNS offering covers you with regards to getting your name servers within the .bank zone. When you configure your domain with us, we automatically create name servers that are subdomains of your domain. So if you have lexsynergy.bank, we would create name servers such as ns1.lexsynergy.bank and ns2.lexsynergy.bank. So you don't need to worry about meeting that security requirement. The same is said for DNSSEC, which is completely transparently done for you, and you do not need to be aware of the configuration, so you don't need to worry about meeting that security requirement if you use Lexsynergy's DNS offering. We automatically sign your zone, and we also roll the keys over on a regular basis for improved security based on industry standards. The other advantages to using our services, we offer, of course, all the standard and advanced DNS record types, specifically DMARC, SPF, and DKIM. Now, that's a requirement that you must at least use DMARC and or SPF and DKIM, so you must at least use 2 of those record types. And those are fully supported within the Lexsynergy DNS system, and we can also provide you with assistance on how to configure DMARC, SPF, and DKIM, because sometimes these are new records types for some companies and they've not encountered them before, and we can provide technical assistance on setup and debugging during your initial rollout phase before you've gone public to make sure you can send mail to everyone and no one will bounce it. The other aspect is, of course, all of your websites must be served via a HTTPS, so you'll need a valid SSL certificate for that, which Lexsynergy can provide. We provide a variety of certificates across a variety of certificate authorities, as well as the extended validation certificate, where you see the identity of the company is validated, if that is what you want to do. And if we can get the next slide, please. And so to go into a bit more depth about our DNS offering, because we run 2 types of DNS infrastructure, the one we put your .bank domain on is our premium DNS or AnyClass DNS offering. AnyClass DNS provides added redundancy as well as additional security protections against, for example, denial of service attacks, which is also short DDoS. This is achieved by having a variety of locations around the globe, as you can see in the map. And if a customer, let's say, is in Toronto and they connect and they look up your DNS records, they will communicate directly with Toronto. But if the Toronto nodes are knocked off the internet, for example, because of an attack, they will go to the next closest available DNS server and will not notice any downtime at all. This means that DNS queries are responded to very quickly because they take the shortest route possible, and also it makes it much more difficult for a nefarious person to attack the whole DNS infrastructure and take it down, as it is incredibly challenging. This provides the added security and performance benefits of AnyClass DNS. As we also covered, they're also DNSSEC compatible, and you use your branded name servers, and they all support the advanced query record types such as DMARC, DKIM, SPF, as well as your standard A records, C names, and what have you. We also support monthly query reporting if you require it. We can look in and tell you the query counts on your DNS records if that's something that's required. And one thing which is, of course, quite important for a lot of customers is when you make an update to your DNS records, they are propagated in real time to all DNS servers across the internet. So you do not need to wait some providers will make you wait 15 minutes, half an hour for a record to actually hit all of their DNS servers and become customer-facing. That is not the case with Lexsynergy. When you do it, it's near real time. We're talking less than a second to propagate across all of our infrastructure. And lastly, but not least, our DNS servers are all IPv4 and IPv6 compatible. IPv6 is the new addressing format of the internet because we have exhausted or nearly exhausted our IPv4 space. So this means that people that are only on IPv6 networks will still be able to fully communicate with our DNS infrastructure, as well with people only on IPv4. That goes for all of our infrastructure, actually, which is all dual stacked across both. And now if I perhaps hand back to Marina.
Yep. Great. Thank you, Jake. And one last item we'd like to review is portfolio centralization. And due to a desire for increased security, many of our .bank domains have been centralizing their domain portfolio with Lexsynergy, which is essentially the process of transferring domains from other registrars like GoDaddy or Network Solutions and transferring those domains into your Lexsynergy account. Having domains all in one location makes your portfolio easier to manage and more secure. And the security of your domains is definitely top priority for us. Our online portal security features include two-factor authentication, which is required for all accounts that have a .bank domain. We offer IP restrictions so that only users on certain IP addresses can access your account. This way, employees won't be able to log in at home or on any other potentially unsecured networks. We have a strict policy where only authorized contacts can request changes to your account and domains, and our portal is fully secured and encrypted. So if you are interested in transferring your other domains to Lexsynergy, please contact us and we'll provide a quote for that transfer. Now we'd like to open it up for questions. If you do have any questions, please send those through in the Q&A box on the WebEx. And so far it doesn't look like we have any questions right now. I know it was a lot of information that was reviewed in kind of a short amount of time, but we do offer one-on-one calls to discuss the transfer process. So if you are interested, we can set up a one-on-one call to discuss migrating over to a .bank domain. Here's our contact information. And yeah, if there's no questions, I'd like to thank Craig and Drew from FTLD for joining us today, and thank all of the attendees for your participation on the webinar. As I mentioned at the beginning, we'll be sending out a recording of the webinar to all attendees. So thank you again, and have a great day.